I love movies. Gosh, I love movies.
We come to this place for magic.
I watch a lot of movies.
You do?
Yeah, I watch about a movie a day.
Welcome to Cinephomaniacs, a podcast by and for movie lovers. I'm Peyton.
And I'm Andrew. In this episode, we're talking about two new releases, I Love Boosters and Is God Is.
But first, we're going to briefly talk about what else we've been watching lately in a segment we call Added to Watch List. So our first one, I actually found out about today when the trailer popped up on the top of my Instagram page. Apparently, Robert Pattinson is playing Chris Hansen in a new A24 movie called Primetime.
I saw that trailer too. I thought it was a really interesting role for Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, I think he's been taking nothing but interesting roles lately. And we're looking at its Letterboxd page right now, and other cast members listed are Phoebe Bridgers, Skylar Gisondo, Merritt Weaver. That's crazy.
It's a really fun cast. I feel like you said, Robert Pattinson's always choosing interesting roles. It's directed by Lance Oppenheim, a documentary filmmaker. He actually directed Some Kind of Heaven a few years ago, which is about the villages in our home state of Florida. He's directed a few other documentaries that I've seen have a lot of fans on Letterboxd, like Ren Fair and Sperm World. Primetime will be his first narrative feature, and he's really branching out because it's a biopic about a real person.
Yeah, that is interesting. It'll be neat to watch him go from documentary to mockumentary. The trailer at least presents like that is the kind of film that it's going to be. And I've never really watched To Catch a Predator, which is kind of surprising because true crime shows and documentaries were big in my house growing up. But I think this cast and crew are really exciting, so this is one I'll keep an eye on for sure.
One I'm really looking forward to, and we just got a new trailer for it today, is Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, which is the new film from Jane Schoenbrunn, the director of I Saw the TV Glow.
That's one that I know we both love a lot. A lot. So this one is high up on our watch list.
After I Saw the TV Glow, I'll watch anything she directs, but the concept of this movie sounds really interesting to me. It's a play on a slasher. Hannah Einbinder stars as a director making a remake of the film within a film, Camp Miasma, and she's reuniting with the original star played by Gillian Anderson, and they have an affair, and all sorts of wacky, weird, psychosexual things happen from there. Same as you, after I Saw the TV Glow, I'd watch anything they did next, so I'm really excited to see their take on a slasher and just anything.
Yeah, I agree. After I Saw the TV Glow, truly, I think they should get blank checks forever. So I'm very excited to add this one to our watch list.
The reception for this one has been pretty much unanimous praise. It premiered at Cannes in competition and won the Queer Palm, which is basically the award for best LGBT movie. And Cannes isn't exactly lacking in movies of that kind, so I'm really excited to see this after that reception. Hannah Einbinder is one that we've been watching lately in Hacks too, so I think it'll be really interesting to see her in a big movie role.
Yeah, she's incredible in Hacks, and this looks like it's going to be a very different kind of role for her, so can't wait for that as well. Another one that premiered at Cannes, but to very different reactions, is Her Private Hell, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn and starring Sophie Thatcher and Havana Rose Liu. I am big fans of both of these ladies. Sophie Thatcher stars in Yellow Jackets, which is one of my favorite shows on right now, probably top 3 favorite shows of all time, to be honest. And Havana stars in Bottoms and has one of my favorite line deliveries ever in that movie. So this is going to be a different role than what I've seen from her. Sophie Thatcher, I've definitely seen in horror before. I really like Drive by Nicholas Winding Refn. That was in my Letterboxd top 4 for a while. His other movies I'm not as crazy about, but I am excited for this one based on the cast alone. Like I said, I love both of them. I really like Charles Melton. I'm a big Riverdale head. So I will be seated for this one.
And I'm seated for anything Refn does too. I watched Too Old to Die Young, which is like 13 hours of Miles Teller just standing there silently, and it was great. So the Reception has been pretty much universally negative to mixed here, and some people who are devout Refn fans are encouraged by that. But we'll see. I've been excited since these actresses signed up for it.
At the very least, it will look incredible and we'll get great performances. So we can look forward to that.
Lots of neon lights and a great soundtrack.
Amen. All right, now we're going to get into something we call Remove from Watch List, where every week we chip away at a few of the movies Andrew has on his Letterboxd watch list. Andrew, what is that sitting at right now?
58,154.
Okay, so we've made some progress, but we still have a bit of a ways to go. But what have you been watching lately?
We saw The Warriors last night at Enzian on VHS. This was in their cult classics block, which is usually where they would play a movie on 35mm film. But since their projector system is getting an upgrade, right now they're playing VHSs through their digital projector system, which has been an interesting experiment for sure.
I love how they look personally. We also saw Masters of the Universe at the Enzian recently in the same format, and that one looked better, if I'm being honest, but I think The Warriors was still very fun. It was New York City, unlike I've ever seen it before, and seeing it on the VHS format always takes me right back to my childhood, so even if it didn't look quite as good, it was still really fun.
There's something special about seeing it in VHS, which isn't really the original format, but spiritually, it kind of is the original format. And it's so charming to see this square, kind of subpar quality image blown up to 4K and projected on a big screen in a room full of people. I hadn't seen this movie in several years, so it's not one I'm super familiar with, but it was really fun to see it, and we both dressed up for it as well.
Yes, you had a great outfit, went sleeveless and everything. I loved it. The different gangs throughout this movie that we meet have just some incredible fits. There are so many different kinds of guys scattered throughout this movie. In particular, there's a baseball gang that also paints their faces up. I really enjoyed that sequence. A lot of the fight choreography in this is just so lively, and it's often so many people in a scene with just bodies flying everywhere, incredible slow motion shots, and again, a New York City that I've never experienced on film before, so this was really cool.
It was funny learning that the writer wrote this as a dark, gritty response to West Side Story, because the way they portray gangs really is just ridiculous. It isn't that far off from West Side Story, but it's so fun to watch. Seeing the way these different gangs LARP and the colors, as they call it, that they wear, you know, they all have these fun themes. And the impact of this movie has just been massive. It's not just a cult classic, but we see it directly influencing movies to this day, like the John Wick franchise. So it's always fun to go back and look at something that's had so much influence like this.
Another one we caught recently that isn't technically a movie, but we did see it in theaters, is The Boys series finale, which, like other movies we've talked about, had some pretty mixed reactions online. We got to see it in 4DX actually the night before it premiered on Amazon, and this show is also up there with definitely one of my top shows that's currently on, or at least was currently on up until very recently. When this came out, I was still very much a Marvel fan and really into all of the superhero movies that are now just kind of churned out and nowhere near the quality that I think they originally were when they first became huge hits. So it was so fun to get something fresh and new, and it starred a lot of actors that I hadn't really seen before. In particular, Anthony Starr as Homelander and Karl Urban as Butcher. I think they are characters of all time for me. They are my favorite rivalry that's ever been put to screen. I think they are giving incredible performances throughout this whole show, but their showdown in the finale, while I had my qualms with how the episode ended after that, and spoiler alert here for those that have not seen it yet, but it was just incredible to see Butcher, Homelander, and Ryan fighting it out in the White House when he's finally depowered. I think I was in the camp of people that felt like that was coming from the moment Soldier Boy and that power was introduced. I definitely thought he would be there and play a part in taking Homelander down. I'm also a bit disappointed with the direction that storyline went, but this has just been something I've been dreading in terms of my favorite show ending, but also just so excited to see Butcher finally get his revenge, take Homelander out in the way that was so deserved. Seeing Homelander scared, depowered, begging for his life, just pathetic, like everyone told him he would be without powers. Like so many real life figures that use their power and intimidation in the way that Homelander does throughout the show, seeing him finally get his comeuppance was just so satisfying.
And I've been a fan of The Boys as well, not in the same way that you are, but I've been following it since the beginning as well. And the series finale and the penultimate episode are the lowest rated 2 episodes of this show. And I think that's a little surprising. I felt like it wrapped everything up really nicely. There aren't a lot of surprises. I think we could have all predicted everything that happens. So it's a pretty textbook finale in that sense. And I don't know if people are rejecting that or if it's just the sort of tacked on ending with Butcher. I'm a little surprised that people aren't a little more satisfied just for the simple fact of seeing Butcher kill Homelander.
I agree, and I think a lot of that has to do with, one, what you touched on, the predictability of it. But I think we live in an age where people often really want that big twist, blow your mind moment. And like you said, they make a plan and they follow it and it works out. And that was satisfactory to me because I think throughout the series, they have been following a series of plans that either work out or don't, but obviously in terms of Homelander have always failed up to this point. But of course, at a certain point, they are going to succeed, and finally they do. And I think the way that Homelander went out, again, is so true to how people in his position do go out in real life. Anthony Starr, as soon as Homelander is depowered, just the immediate shift that you feel from how truly terrifying Homelander can be to just immediately this small, pathetic man. And Karl Urban is at an 11. I was going to say the whole finale, but at least until they kill Homelander, Karl Urban is just showing up and showing out. He is going absolutely nuts, and it is all the better for it. I, again, didn't necessarily love everything that followed, although I did feel it wrapped up nicely. I wasn't dissatisfied. Watching the White House showdown in the theater with you and just a packed house was a life-changing moment for me.
It was such a fun crowd to see it with, and such a fun way to see it, too. We didn't technically pay for our tickets, but we had a mandatory $30 concession fee. So we got to load up on hot dogs and candy and popcorn and sodas as we went in. It's out in 40X with the moving seats and the air blast to your face. My funniest moment with the 40X was when O Father tugs at the straps on the ball gag and our seats shook in unison with it.
That was so fun. O Father and Daveed Diggs were very welcome additions to this season for me. And I think we can't talk about this finale without talking about Starlight versus the Deep. I was so happy that she got to be the one that at least initiated his downfall. I was surprised that this character made it to the series finale, if I'm being honest. And I think truly that is due to the performance that Chase Crawford gives in this role. While the Deep is by no means a good person, the acting choices made by Chase Crawford every second that he has been on screen this entire series are absolutely top-notch. He is so funny. And when Starlight asks him to take responsibility for his actions in his final moments and he just screams no, everyone was cackling. It was an incredible moment, and I just really want to give him his flowers.
I think the Starlight in the Deep showdown has been a long time coming. Since the very first episode, Annie has needed her revenge, and it was so satisfying to finally see it. We see Annie is the one to throw him in the water, the fish are the ones to finish him off, and he dies by a tentacle coming out of his mouth. We don't see where it goes in, but this is The Boys, so I think we can guess. And I can't say enough about how good Anthony Starr and Daveed Diggs were this season. Anthony Starr in the whole show, Daveed Diggs coming in the final season as pretty much a main character and never feels out of place, really earns every second he gets.
And I also want to give flowers to Erin Moriarty and Colby Minfie, who play Starlight and Ashley. Ashley is a character that in season 1 I never saw making it to the finale, let alone making it out alive, but she has just been so funny and electric on screen, also every scene she's in. And she has kind of her hero moment in the finale that I didn't know if the show would give her, and I was really happy and proud to see that from her. And Starlight, of course, till the very end, even in her fight with the Deep, despite what he has done to her in the past and what she knows he's done to other people even, she is still trying to convince him that there is a better future for him, that he doesn't need to keep fighting for Homelander, and he just won't accept it. And I think Erin Moriarty has brought such humanity to this character that has really resonated with me, and Starlight will be very missed for me as well.
It's showtime, folks.
So now, for the reason you're all here, let's talk I Love Boosters and Is God Is. So we're going to start with I Love Boosters, which we actually just got out of. We're recording this like an hour after we watched the movie. And this was written and directed by Boots Riley, whose only other feature film actually is Sorry to Bother You, which is in my Letterboxd top 4. That one had such a huge impact on me when it came out. Every time I think about it, I get so excited and invigorated and inspired. I think if you haven't seen that one, honestly pause this and go watch it right now and come back. But he is also the co-founder of a political music group called The Coup, who he's made several albums with, including one titled Sorry to Bother You, which actually was released in 2012, but was a big inspiration for the film that came out in 2018. And that movie has similar themes to I Love Boosters in that it's about the class divide and class struggle and the choices people make to either fight for better conditions for themselves or for themselves and their fellow man. And they're both movies that I just love and find so hopeful, especially I Love Boosters.
Hey, Pei, what's your sign again?
I'm a Gemini. What about you?
I'm a Virgo. That's the title of Boots Riley's second project, which we actually watched together recently. It's an Amazon Prime superhero miniseries about a 13-foot tall young man who's basically forced into being a superhero in a commercialized, semi-realistic version of a superhero story. Does that sound kind of familiar?
It does.
And one of the standouts of that show to me was Kara Young, who plays a character called Jones, who has a power called psychic theater. She can basically present her ideas to someone with these projections and sort of imagery that forms around her. It can make her arguments very compelling. And she is the focal point at the end of this show, because it doesn't end in a conventional way with the hero and the villain punching each other. It essentially ends with her making a compelling argument and appealing to the villain with reason and convincing him that he's serving a corrupt corporation to create cheap labor. And I mentioned Kara Young because she was actually in both of the movies we watched tonight, I Love Boosters and the lead role in Is God Is.
Yes, and she was a standout in I'm a Virgo for me as well. Her role in I Love Boosters was definitely smaller than her role in Is God Is, where, like you said, she is one of our leads. But we'll get into I Love Boosters first. So like we said, this one was written and directed by Boots Riley and stars Keke Palmer, Naomi Ackie, Taylour Paige, and Poppy Liu.
It starts with the main trio of Corvette, Sade, and Mariah, and they are boosters, which are people who steal designer clothes and sell them for a discount.
Mariah, Taylour Paige's character, actually calls it Triple F, Fashion Forward Philanthropy, and she makes it very clear that she knows how to spell philanthropy, but it's all about the branding.
Keke Palmer's character Corvette is an aspiring designer herself, and she idolizes this huge, world-famous fashion designer, Christy Smith, played by Demi Moore, who it's always nice to see in a big role like this. One of the first conversations we ever had was about her Oscar chances for The Substance.
Yeah, this was a very fun role for her. Here, she is a character that we've seen in a lot of media lately, in that she is this narcissistic, billionaire mogul type who thinks that they are a curator of culture and fashion and doing something good for the world, but really is just exploiting the labor of all of those that work for her to boost herself up.
And I think this would make a really interesting double feature with The Devil Wears Prada, because her character almost feels like an answer to Miranda Priestley, Meryl Streep's character in that movie. Miranda has that famous cerulean speech in The Devil Wears Prada where she basically tears Anne Hathaway down and shows her why the work that they're doing in the fashion industry is so important, and trickles down all the way to even people who aren't tuned into fashion. And here we have Demi Moore's character making some similar speeches. First of all, getting the color of blue wrong that Keke Palmer is wearing, but later talking in a very cynical way about how the work she's doing can change the color that everyone in a small town in a flyover state is wearing. And it's not a flattering portrayal of a tastemaker. It really is shown in a very cynical, egomaniacal way.
So our main source of conflict in this film revolves around the fact that our core trio almost exclusively boosts from stores owned and operated by Demi Moore and her corporation. And Christy, Demi Moore's character, quickly catches on to the fact that it is the same group of people that are hitting all of her stores. And of course, she's not happy about this. So resentment continues to build on both sides, and things escalate a bit until our main characters decide they're going to completely clear out one of the stores.
And this is where the movie takes its first real turn, because they're beaten to the punch. The store's already been cleared out by Poppy Liu's character, Jianu, who enters at this point. Jianu is a Chinese factory worker with a teleportation device that allowed her to come to the United States and then steal these clothes very quickly, almost like a giant vacuum.
Yes, and I thought this was such an interesting character, and I loved this aspect of the story, because while we definitely are getting more media portraying the reality of class struggle these days, I don't know that I've seen a movie like this that ties it all together in such a global context, because of course, while the retail workers at all of these stores owned by Christie are being exploited, of course, even more so are the factory workers actually making the clothing, putting in pretty much an entire day's work for barely any pay, putting themselves in conditions that are shown throughout the film to be very dangerous, even causing a couple of characters to be diagnosed with cancer. And Christy is aware of this, but refuses to do anything about it because it would negatively affect her bottom line. And I really was moved by the way Boots Riley tied all that in together, and how perfectly Jianu fit into our core trio, and how willing they were to help each other out in this struggle.
It gives it more of a multifaceted look at the problem of this fast fashion industry. We see its impact in the fashion world, its impact on retail workers, and then all the way down to the people who are actually making these clothes for pennies. And this movie is many things, but subtle is not one of them. It pretty much tells you what it's about at every stage. This teleportation device it's a sci-fi plot device that allows them to go on with their mission of stealing clothes. It's also a metaphor for some of the movie's themes. It has 3 modes. One is teleportation, the other is acceleration, and the other is deconstruction.
Situational acceleration, actually, which I found to be so interesting, and again was also not something I'd seen in a movie before. So essentially, teleportation, of course, is allowing our characters to steal these clothes so quickly because it essentially acts as a vacuum. So they're either sending the clothes back to places owned by our boosters for them later to be sold back to the community, or they're being sent back to China so that these factory workers can reclaim the fruits of their labor. However, the two other settings, situational acceleration and deconstruction, either amplify whatever situation, person, anything that it's pointed at, or deconstruction, of course, is the antithesis of that. So, for example, when pointed at an article of clothing designed by Christie, it will deconstruct it down into the core of what it's made of. So, for example, at one point, our characters need to go through a doorway, and they use the deconstruction setting, and it turns the door into a tree, allowing them to pass through.
And this is where Eiza Gonzalez's character does a lot of the heavy lifting of explaining what this device is and how it works. Up to this point, she's been mostly a comic relief character. She is a retail worker in one of Christie's stores. She has bleached eyebrows. She basically looks like Gabriette. She doesn't actually look like Eiza Gonzalez that much if you've seen her in other roles. And she's serving a function kind of like Stephen Yoon's in Sorry to Bother You, which is a labor organizer offering more of a grounded, realistic alternative to what our main characters are doing. And she explains these three settings on the device. We have, acceleration, which is a literal plot device, which can accelerate the fashion trends of certain items they pointed at. But it can also represent more of a political acceleration. For example, they pointed at a cop car and it accelerates into this Transformers suit. And we see Eric Andre as this cop who's just like, hell yeah.
Yes, and Eric Andre is one of many fun cameos we get in this movie. We also get Don Cheadle in a very fun role. If I didn't know it was him, I don't know that I would have recognized him. Adam Devine is here for a second. We have Jason Ritter, whom is married to Melanie Lynskey, also of Yellow Jackets fame, so I have a soft spot for him just because of that. We have Viggo Mortensen and Kate Berlant lending their voices in some parts.
And Kara Young's role is a small but significant one. She and Jason Ritter and Jermaine Fowler are all playing these media archetypes. And in this movie, since it's not exactly subtle, their names are what they are. So she plays Crying Black Mother. And she's basically a tool for the media to always cry for, we need to raise the price of housing, or we need to get rid of rent control. Jason Ritter is playing upstanding community member. He's another useful tool for the media to say, yeah, the strike earned me higher pay, but I really miss the freedom of earning less money.
Or, oh, now I have insurance benefits, but they're so confusing, they don't end up being benefits at all. And these characters, while they may not have a lot of screen time, they actually lead to one of my favorite sequences and reveals in the entire film. So we are told early on that Christie, Demi Moore's character, has developed suits that are worth $100,000 each. And throughout the film, our main trio of boosters are trying to find these suits because, of course, if they can boost these, that would be a great investment back into their community. And it would also, of course, ensure their own financial security. So as we enter the third act of the movie, our main trio and Jianhu run into a room where all of these characters are congregated, and they finally learn what these $100,000 suits really are.
They confront these media archetypes of upstanding community member, crying black mother, Don Cheadle's character, Dr. Jack, and they're wearing sharp suits, but not exactly groundbreaking. They tell them, okay, take off the suits. And they take off those suits, and then they take off their skin, because the $100,000 suits are the skin that they're wearing. Christie Smith has designed skin suits that allow you to be people she has created for you to be.
Yes, and this is right up with the equestrian reveal in Sorry to Bother You for me. This is an absolutely crazy sequence, and like Andrew said, not very subtle, but I love the commentary here of how people like Christie Smith, both in this universe and in our real world, are able to manufacture outrage and focused on issues that will not materially improve our living conditions. And on top of that, once these people remove their skin, they're filmed in stop motion, and we get this mix of stop motion and our real world and real life human characters that I've personally never seen on screen before and was mesmerized by.
And it just gives the movie a lot of charm to see the craftsmanship that went into it.
And thankfully, we're not yet at a point where AI has taken over most of animation or creating effects like this, but in a time where it does feel like maybe that's on the rise, it was so wonderful to see so much of this that was clearly man-made, handmade with care, and you could just tell so much heart was put into it. For a movie that has such an important message, I really was moved, despite the fact that what's happening on screen is so absolutely absurd.
And this is where the movie pretty much goes into an action climax. We have them using the device to jump between Christie's fashion show and the factory in China. And we've seen movies that use teleportation or use gravity in an interesting way, but I don't think I've ever seen it quite like this. Some of the ways they just throw Keke Palmer around where, she'll jump vertically in one location, but she's horizontal in the next. And it makes for a really interesting visually and interestingly edited climax.
So our film ends, like you said, oscillating between a fashion show that's being held by Christie, where she's invited workers from her stores all across the country, and the factory in China that Jianhu is from, and where a lot of the factory workers have been trying to organize to fight for better working conditions for themselves. And so they use the device that has been so key to every aspect of this film and set it to situational accelerator and essentially just point it at everyone in the crowd at both the fashion show and in the factory, which, due to the disruption that's already occurred, all of these workers are already frustrated with their working conditions, with the amount that they're getting paid for their labor versus what the ruling class is getting, those in positions like Christie. And so once the situational accelerator is released into these crowds, it essentially inspires them to start striking. And we're given the impression that Christie's stores are like any department store you might see that are just everywhere. And we see that the strikes held by both workers of Christie and by the factory workers in China are pretty immediately successful for them, at least in terms of securing them higher pay and safer working conditions. And this in turn inspires people in all industries all over the world to do the same thing. And I think this is such a powerful and hopeful ending, and I've seen a lot of interviews in which Boots Riley talks about how he is hopeful that this is the kind of future we can build where people are able to come together and fight for a world where we all see the appropriate fruits of our labor. And it's a much tamer ending than I think I was expecting from such a fantastically outrageous film. But we saw it in a fairly packed theater, and I really hope that's how it's going across the country, because I think this is very inspiring and a message that a lot of people need to hear right now. I think it's such a hopeful film, such a fun film, and in the time that we're in right now, I think it's a film that people really would benefit from seeing.
Yeah, it's Boots Riley pointing toward the problem in a very stylized, over-the-top way, and then offering a much more practical, grounded solution to that problem in our real world. The idea of a general strike is pretty ambitious in the system we're living in right now, but still realistic, a lot more realistic than the equestrians or a teleportation device. And it is very cool to see this movie getting the kind of attention it is. A movie that's so colorful, that's doing so many interesting things in its construction and in its storytelling style, and a movie that's carrying these messages and getting them across to people in this kind of fun action comedy.
I agree, and I've been very impressed with both Boots Riley and the main cast, at least of women that I've seen in interviews, because all of them have really been talking about these themes and about labor rights and activism in a way that I really don't think we often see on Hollywood press tours. And so it just truly warms my heart to see people in their position trying to spread the message that the movie also does an incredible job of explaining. Despite the film being so absurd, and I mean that positively at times, like you said, he presents a very grounded solution and shows us that if we do come together, there is hope and things can get better. So I would recommend you run, not walk to this one.
Girls, I'm gonna make this real simple. Make your daddy dead. Real dead.
The second movie we're talking about today is God Is, written and directed by Aleshea Harris. This is actually her directorial debut, and it is based on a play of the same name that she also wrote. It stars Carrie Young and Mallori Johnson as two twins who know they were somehow burned in a fire when they were younger, but don't really have any memory of exactly what happened with that or of their parents. Carrie Young's character, Racine, has burns that run all up one of her arms. Mallori Johnson's character, Anaya, has burn scars on her face, leading to her being our character that's a bit more reserved, while Racine really is the one who kind of has had to stand up for both of them their whole lives. We're told early on in the film that because Racine's face wasn't burned and she's still, quote, pretty, that she's the one that's kind of learned to stick up for the both of them, that is more confident in confronting other people, and that really leads the charge in a lot of ways.
And even though their personalities differ, they share a very close relationship. We see scenes where they have this sort of twin telepathy, and they can convey complex conversations to each other without ever saying a word.
Yes, and I thought it was so fun how they portrayed this. When they would speak to each other telepathically, we would see what they were saying in text on screen. And the font was gorgeous and just would be all over the place. It never looked the same from one shot to the next. And I thought that was a really interesting element.
So they get a letter from their mom, who they thought burned in the fire that burned them. It turns out she's still alive, but she's dying. And so she calls them to come to her on her deathbed in Virginia. When they see their mother, she's badly burned. She's played by Vivica A. Fox, who's mostly playing the role from a bed covered in a lot of makeup, which honestly is pretty impressive for the level of budget this movie is. Before they ever go in, they refer to their mother as God because she was the one who created them.
Yes, I really liked this exchange between the sisters. This isn't a perspective I'd really considered before, but it rocked my world a little bit. Racine essentially asks Mallori if she's ready to meet God, and Mallory's like, what are you talking about? And Racine says, well, she created us, didn't she? And I thought that was such a powerful line. I was like, oh shit.
They talk to God, and she tells them the story of how they got burned. We see in a flashback how it was their own father, played by Sterling K. Brown, who was an abuser. She had kicked him out of the home, and he came in, put her in the bathtub, and lit her on fire. And the two twins came in and tried to put her out, and that's how they were burned. She didn't want them to see her like this, so she allowed them to go into the foster system for the next 20 years or so. But now that she's dying, she's called them because she has a request for them. She wants them to get revenge on their father. She actually says, I want you to make him dead.
Make your daddy dead is what she tells them to do. And at first, I was a bit surprised, at least by Racine's reaction. I thought she would immediately be into it, but both Racine and Anaya are kind of like, okay, I know that what he did was horrible, but you really want us to hunt this guy down and murder him? And like Andrew said, when we first see their mother, when we first see God, she is covered in blankets and kind of a skin-colored fabric to hide the burns. And she is surrounded by three women who are braiding her hair and kind of act like our Greek chorus in this moment. And she instructs them to remove the blanket that she's covered in. And we actually, the audience, does not get to see what is underneath it, but it is clear from Racine and Anaya's reactions that whatever is under that blanket, whatever has happened to their mother as a result of their father's actions, is clearly horrific, is the reason why she's dying this slow, painful death. and it really motivates both of them to want to go on this mission and fulfill her request.
And this is a revenge story, a little unlike one you might have seen before. It may start with Vivica A. Fox, but this isn't Kill Bill. First off, they don't know where their father is, so they spend the first chunk of the movie going to see people who were in his life, trying to get ideas of where he went. They first go to the woman he took up with while he was actually on trial for starting the fire, named Divine. She's leading this very small, very passionate, charismatic church out of her house. She has a son, Ezekiel, so Racine and Naya's half-brother, and she's been living in waiting ever since the trial, because as soon as he was acquitted, he just bounced.
And she's presenting the situation to Racine and Anaya as their father is this incredible, almost mythical man who, of course, will come back one day and care for her and their son. She actually has a shrine to him that they reveal to us at one point that has, I think, a jacket of his and just some very random articles that he would have left behind. And Racine and Anaya, well, Racine specifically, immediately pushes back and says, wait, you're essentially worshiping this man who was on trial for setting his wife and 2 daughters on fire and then left you while you were pregnant and hasn't spoken to you since, and your son is now a grown man. And of course, Divine does not take this well, so they're pretty much immediately told to leave the house. But luckily enough, before getting kicked out, Racine managed to snatch Divine's address book, so they have their next destination.
And their next stop is their father's lawyer, Chuck Hall, who's played by Michael T. Williamson. This is a character who we learn in flashback had his tongue ripped out by their father because his father didn't want him to share what he knew. And he spent the next 20 years or so of his life paying women to inflict pain on him, not because it's a kink of his, but because he wants to be prepared for the day that will eventually come where someone comes to hurt him. He doesn't want to succumb to this beating and revealing information. And in walk these 2 twins to give him that beating.
And for how serious that sounds and is, this was one of the funnier scenes in the movie for me. Of course, it's horrific what Sterling K. Brown's character has done to this man, but because of that, he has to use a whiteboard to communicate with the girls, and the whole time they're asking him for information on where they can find their father, he is just begging them to let this go, that their father is a bad man and they don't want any part of this. He says at one point, when you seek vengeance, you don't know where the blood will land, which does end up being almost prophetic by the end of the film. But at one point he's writing for a while and he turns the whiteboard around and the twins read us the message in unison, and it essentially says something along the lines of, please girls, let this go, get a nice job, go to a community college, get yourself a degree, you can live a life, it doesn't have to be this. And they're just not having any of that. So like Chuck has been preparing for, eventually Racine decides it's time for more drastic action to get information out of this man.
Some of the humor comes out of the fact that even though he doesn't have his tongue, he's no less verbose. In a lot of movies like this where a character can't speak, usually they're just writing a few words at a time, maybe even not complete sentences, but he's writing these lengthy, multi-page, kind of poetic messages to them throughout the scene, which really gives it a lot of character and humor.
But like we said, he's not giving them the information that they're asking for. So before they actually entered his office, Racine had put a rock into one of Anaya's socks because they didn't know what they were walking into. So she wanted to be prepared, and she starts using this to try to get Chuck to tell them where their dad is. And even though he has been prepping for 20 years for this exact moment, he folds pretty much immediately after getting hit with that rock, and I can't blame him.
And this weapon of a sock carrying a rock pretty much becomes their weapon for the rest of the film. It becomes a representation of how much violence they're willing to inflict. Chuck gives up their father's location, and before they leave, he also gives them a little more information. Their father had 2 more kids. They were twins, and they were boys.
So that, of course, is a pretty devastating revelation to Racine and Anaya, because the implication here is that he has this new family that he's been raising while he essentially left them for dead after all these years.
They travel across the country to California, which is where their father lives now. And before they arrive, we get to see a little of this home he's built. It's this really large, nice mansion. We don't ever find out what exactly it is he does, but it's clear he's made a good life for himself. His new wife is portrayed by Janelle Monáe. She is clearly an abused wife, if not physically, then emotionally. She spends all day on her hands and knees scrubbing the entire house, preparing it for when he comes home. But today just happens to be the day she has decided to take all the money she has, get in her car, and leave him for good.
Yes, I thought Janelle Monáe did an excellent job with this portrayal. I think it does show flashes of him physically abusing her, so I think the implication is that she's been a victim of that in some ways as well. But clearly, we immediately get the vibe from her that her husband does not treat her well. And unfortunately for her, as she's making her journey to her new life, she comes across Racine and Anaya on their way to their father's house. And this was a very interesting scene to me because, of course, Angie doesn't recognize these two girls at first, but they reveal to her pretty quickly that they are Sterling K. Brown's character's first children, first set of twins. And she is pretty shocked by this revelation. Apparently, he had told her that his first wife and daughter's first family essentially had passed away. So she immediately assumes that Racine and Anaya are there for some kind of money or child support situation, and she offers them some of the expensive jewelry and pearls that she has on, and is kind of trying to reason with them, like, listen, I didn't know the truth of the situation. I'm a victim of this horrible man too. Please just take what I have, but get out of my way. I gotta get out of here. And unfortunately, things do start to escalate. Angie is getting more and more frustrated and, of course, scared because every second that goes by, it's possible that Sterling K. Brown's character could return home. And again, clearly, despite it being a very different situation from Racine and Anaya and their mother, she is an abused woman that's been put in a horrible situation by this man. But eventually she really lashes out in anger and says some horrible things about our main twins and their mother, and eventually actually spits in Racine's face, which unfortunately for her was a fatal mistake.
On the one hand, she's very sympathetic, and we understand that her only goal right now should be to get away from this abuse. But on the other, she's dismissive of these other women who are victims of the same man.
She even says that if their mother was a strong woman, she would have left.
We also see a classist dynamic between them because even though they're both victims and victims of the same man, she doesn't see herself as being as low as them. One, because she's leaving, but also just because she has more money than them. It's that and her spitting in her face that sets off Racine and leads Racine to kill her with the rock in a sock.
Yes, and Anaya is very clearly distraught by this action. While she has sort of begrudgingly agreed to go along with this mission as long as Racine is the one to actually kill their father, she very clearly does not want anyone else to be hurt while they're on this quest. While from Racine's perspective, these are people who have enabled what happened to them and in turn enabled what Sterling K. Brown's character has done to other people, and just are continuing this cycle of violence and are looking down on her and her sister for being victims of the same abuse and situation that, or similar situation that Angie's character is. So it is a very interesting dynamic. And unfortunately, things will not go Anaya's way in terms of the amount of blood that is shed as we continue through this story.
They make their way to the house and meet their half-brothers, the twins, Scotch and Riley. Scotch is a little bigger physically. He's maybe the better-looking one, the one who's always fit in more socially. Riley is smaller, more reserved. He's smarter, but has kind of shrunk into the shadows because his brother has been so successful socially. So they're kind of a mirror image to Racine and Naya.
And another very funny moment from this movie comes when they do knock on the door and meet their half-brothers, because for some reason, Scotch, the more outgoing of the twins, immediately assumes that because their birthday is in 2 weeks, their dad must have hired these two girls as strippers for them.
Which is an absurd leap.
Riley thinks so as well, but eventually Scotch is able to convince him that this is totally something that their dad would do and they should just let them in and have fun with it.
The girls overhear this and they go along with it as they're in. As they're getting ready to put on this show for the boys, Racine realizes that Anaya is pregnant.
And this is a big reveal to the audience as well, because as far as I could tell, this wasn't really hinted at throughout the story, other than we're told early on that Anaya does have some sort of partner, but we aren't given much information about him.
God hints earlier that she knows Anaya has a secret. She said she has some line like, "That's not all she's carrying."
Oh, that is interesting. I hadn't caught that.
So the girls share a little moment over this, and then they go out to strip for their half-brothers and several other boys because Scotch has invited all his friends out.
And Riley is clearly very uncomfortable with this situation. I want to give Justin Ross a shout out here. His acting is very funny, just the way he plays. I think we've all been, not in this situation necessarily, but in a room full of so-called friends where you just feel like you're crawling out of your skin. I think he had an excellent portrayal of that. So he eventually exits and goes to just hang out elsewhere in the house rather than continue to participate in this. And unfortunately, both overall and for the well-being of these boys, some of Scotch's friends start to kind of make fun of Anaya, who is the twin with burns on her face. And Scotch actually gets up and says that Racine can keep doing what she's doing, but Anaya is going to have to turn around if she wants to keep dancing for them.
So Anaya leaves. She goes in the kitchen with Riley, and they form a connection because they realize that they have a similar dynamic with their twins. You know, their twin being the much more outgoing one, the one who's always fit in, and they were more reserved, didn't quite fit into the world. Meanwhile, Racine is offended on her sister's behalf, so she gets Scotch in a room alone to give him a lap dance and crushes his throat with this sling she's created. So she has immediately violated Anaya's wishes that they don't kill anyone else. Scotch stumbles out holding his throat and dies coughing up his own blood. All of his friends just run away. They're not having any of it. And Riley is kind of in shock for a moment, hysterically crying, laughing, just mourning his brother. Racine and Anaya clash because Anaya has just told her, "Don't kill anyone." And Racine is saying, "Well, I did it for you." But that conflict doesn't go far because it turns out nice guys aren't always nice, and Riley decides that he is going to kill them. And so now, defending her sister, Anaya ends up killing Riley.
Which, to be fair, I'm not going to assume that Riley was the nicest guy. But in this situation, I think maybe it's fair he acted out.
So both girls have now killed someone, although I would argue in Anaya's case it was more self-defense. And we're now at the point in the story where Sterling K. Brown enters the picture. Because the father returns to the home, and for the longest time we don't see his face. We just kind of follow his feet as he goes about his routine. He calmly walks into the house. He takes off his... Well, first of all, he's wearing boat shoes when he steps out, which is a very funny character detail. But he takes off his boat shoes, slips into his house slippers, and very calmly walks past his son's bodies, makes himself a sandwich, and calmly confronts the girls who are very poorly trying to hide from him. And Sterling K. Brown is doing some really interesting things in his performance here. He's speaking very softly, slightly higher than he would normally speak. And I couldn't tell if he was wearing like an implant in his teeth or if this was just something in his performance, but he just looked a little less handsome than he normally does. You can see how this man can be very charming and get a lot of people to bend to his will, and yet you can tell there's just something off with him.
Yeah, I love the performance from both Sterling K. Brown and Mallori Johnson here because, of course, Anaya is terrified to finally come face to face with this man who she believes at this point lit her sister, and her mother on fire and left them for dead. And Sterling K. Brown is just bringing such calm and charisma almost, but there is such darkness just barely under the surface creeping out that he just does such a good job of showing. I think it's at least at first, a very subtle performance that you just feel in your whole body.
And he is not at all remorseful for lighting their mother on fire. He straightforwardly admits to it and basically says, yeah, I did it. She deserved it. He says that he lit her on fire because she wouldn't let him hold her. To which Anaya says, don't you think that's a bit of a reaction? And he says it's a very reasonable reaction for a young man in his position. In all these years, he has not come to be remorseful about this at all, which just kind of stuns Anaya.
He does, however, tell her that she's been misled and that he would never have tried to light his babies on fire. He claims that while he did, in his words, reasonably do that to their mother, that their mother was the one who caused their burns because she, after being attacked by him, grabbed on to both girls and would not let go, essentially trying to blame her for the latter part of the situation.
Do you believe him?
No. But I do think, again, Sterling's performance here is incredible because I think you want to. He's crying. While he has expressed that he is not remorseful for what he did to their mother, he does seem to be expressing remorse that it resulted in harm coming to them as well. And actually at this point, Anaya shares with him that she is pregnant, which she does so more to protect herself from this violent man, hoping that he won't kill the grandbaby inside of her more than a bonding moment with her father. But they both just play it so brilliantly, and Sterling K. Brown is able to kind of talk her down, convince her that maybe he isn't this monster that has been built up and that we've been hearing about the entire film. And finally, when he's able to, take the rock away from her and kind of get her to calm down, get her in his arms, that is when he decides to reveal his true nature, and the turn is just chilling.
And I don't believe him either, but I think that it gives us some insight into how he's convinced himself that everything he's done is right, and maybe convinced some other people of the same thing. And it's also a little bit of projection, perhaps, of what he would do if he were lit on fire and someone were near him. Not to foreshadow too heavily. So he is, in a way, disarmed by finding out that his daughter is pregnant, and he acknowledges that this is all that's left of his bloodline at this point. This is going to be his first grandchild, possibly his only grandchild at this point, although he has restarted his family a few times at this point. But that doesn't stop him from slapping her, because he's very angry at this point over the deaths of his sons, which puts them in a bit of a standoff. She has this mission to kill him. He says, if you kill me, I'm going to kill you, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to kill my only grandson.
At this point, however, after he slaps her, Anaya understands his true nature and that he is not remorseful at all. He was almost certainly lying about how Anaya and Racine got burned. And so she does pick that sock with the rock back up, and she gets ready to stand off with him. But thankfully, Racine, who again had been passed out up to this point, does wake up in time to join this fight on Anaya's side, of course. And once the twins come together, they really are an unstoppable force, even against this evil man.
And it's not an easy fight at first because he is a lot bigger than them and he's so much more vicious. But working together, they're able to take him down. And there's something really satisfying in seeing them just beat the shit out of him. They manage to knock him out and get him to the bathtub and light him on fire, just like he lit their mother on fire. However, as they're leaving, he grabs Racine and pulls her into the fire with him.
So unfortunately, only one of our twins does make it out of this mission alive. And after this happens, I was kind of surprised how abruptly the movie does end. Of course, Anaya makes it out of the house, which at this point is starting to be engulfed in flames. And she kind of backtracks through some of the areas we saw her make her way through earlier with Racine, and we get a little montage of the two together while Racine is voicing over how now Anaya will make her way in this world alone for the very first time until her baby is born. And the movie closes out with Anaya holding her baby and telling her about her aunt Racine and this powerful mission that they went on and fulfilled together, essentially saying that the cycle of violence is ending here and that her and her baby are going to go on to hopefully have a happy life outside of the influence of their father, who now can't touch them anymore, thankfully, because he's no longer with us.
I was really impressed with the performances in this movie. Sterling K. Brown is great, of course, but I think it really rides on the strengths of Cara Young and Mallori Johnson. Cara Young, in a lot of ways, has the meatier role. Even though both of the twins are in almost every scene, I think Cara Young is playing the showier character, and she's also the one who's not covered in makeup. And Cara Young, who we were really impressed with in I'm a Virgo, is sneakily a very acclaimed actress. She was nominated for the Tony for Best Featured Actress the last 4 years in a row for Clyde's Cost of Living, and then she won for Pearly Victorious and Purpose. So I think this is one of her probably highest profile lead roles in a movie, and I'm really excited to see where she goes next. Mallori Johnson, who has the more difficult role just due to being covered in makeup and having to act through that, really gets to carry the third act with Racine being knocked out and her having Sterling K. Brown as the scene partner, really having to go toe-to-toe with him, and she definitely holds her own.
Absolutely, and they make the relationship between the twin sisters feel so raw and real, and it is devastating when Anaya loses Racine at the end, but the fact that they still manage to tie it together with an ending that feels so hopeful, I really enjoyed. And I was really happy that both this movie and I Love Boosters ended with messages that things can get better and you can end toxic cycles, either of violence or of oppression. And I would really recommend seeing both of these movies just for that injection of hope alone, and also for the fact that they're both just incredible movies that are action-packed and full of fantastic performances, beautiful colors, scenery, everything you could ask for.
There's something really biblical about this movie, and it's not just the title. You know, we have twins, we have killing brothers, killing fathers, the stone within the sling. The title asks, is God is, and we know in the context of this movie that God is their mother who created them. Their mother may have passed on, but Anaya can go on and create new life. So the title asks, is God is, and we know that at the end, God will continue to be as she goes on to create.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Cinephomaniacs and talking movies with us. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much every other podcast platform.
And you can also follow me on my Substack, Andrew Likes Movies, to read my written reviews.
You can also follow us on Instagram and Letterboxd at Cinephomaniacs. We're so glad you could join us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye!
Did you nut? Usually you nut.